All right. I got a lot of things I want to talk about on my list. So I'm just going to methodically work through them today and the next few days. So today I want to talk about tattoos and the significance of tattoos spiritually, therapeutically, aesthetically, what it means to get a tattoo. Um, and then over the next 3 or 4 days, I've already got a list of things I want to talk about. I want to talk about an experience about learning the chud practice, which is part of Tibetan Buddhism. Very uh, beautiful, wonderful, kind of strange set of chants associated with cutting attachment to the self. And I have four um, articulations or four principles that have sort of developed after my reading on Emerson. I had two of them that I talked about earlier, like last month, and since then I have developed a few more. Four principles of, I don't know, spiritual activity, something like that. But today is tattoos. So I got a tattoo yesterday. Um, Here, it's healing very nicely, and I'm not gonna. Well, maybe I can show it to you. Yeah. Right. So uh, it's kind of an abstract design, but what it represents is a bunch of people in a mead hall and a bird flying through. So this is some calligraphy I designed for a meal, a Thanksgiving meal. So here meaning our house, my wife and I have always had a big gathering the weekend before Thanksgiving, and since before we were married, so more than 25 years. It was a long time a long time. And I always, at least for the last, I don't know, 20 of since very early on, I started telling the story that comes from the Venerable Bede, who was a British or English Saxon, sorry. He was a Saxon monk, lived in Northumbria, and around 800s, or maybe a bit earlier, 600s, 700s, a long time ago. And he wrote the Chronicles. Uh, and it's an amalgam of stories, historical facts about who was king and queen when, and who was in charge of which abbey and whatnot. But then there are these stories, and one of them tells the story of the mead hall, which back then was sort of the central part of the village. And in fact, during the winter, I think everyone lived in the mead hall, even if they had separate huts or cottages, whatever they might live in. But certainly there would be evenings spent where everybody in the community would come into the mead hall and they would feast. Think about Beowulf or those kinds of scenes. And the story Bede tells is in that mead hall, there is warmth, there is light, there is community, there is safety. Outside, the door is dark and cold, potentially dangerous. And then on the other end, right, the mead hall has two doors, and behind each door is winter. So a bird flies in through one door, flies through the mead hall, and then out the door. And for the duration that the bird is in the mead hall, all is known, right? The community is known, the present is known, but we don't know what comes before, and we don't know what comes after. So there you go. Our life is encapsulated in the mead hall, surrounded by the unknown. And look, depending on how you think about that, the unknown could be terrifying and cold and dark, or it could just be the source of all things that is perhaps equally mysterious and terrifying, but beautiful and strange and wonderful. But either way, I tell that story, and then we go around the table, and there's maybe 20 people, and everybody tells their story for the year. But I always tell that story. So it's become a thing. So one year I drew this picture, and it was a few years ago I drew that picture. Maybe we missed a year during the peak of COVID, and maybe the first year that we all got back together, I drew that picture. And I have this as a tattoo. My wife got the same design as a tattoo as an armband. It looked beautiful. And my daughter is here this weekend to get the same tattoo. I'm not sure where she's getting it done. So that's the most recent tattoo. The tattoo before that was a few years ago when my dog Reggie died. But there was a period where I just went kind of on retainer. Every month I would go, sometimes twice a month, because there was a window where an artist who I really love, I love her work, I love her as a person, with good connection. That's hardly saying it, right? We for I think nearly 20 years now. She's the only person who's given me tattoos. My body is covered with art that she has done. It's an amazing collection. This was sort of the first set of big pieces that we did, and then just carried on from there. So when I say that a tattoo is significant, the image of the tattoo is kind of the least important part. I love the images of all the tattoos I've got, but they could have been different, because what's important for me is the sensation of getting a tattoo. And there's a couple of different ways that's important. Like in the immediate physical sense, there's a machine that's buzzing away, bzzz, quite loud. And then there's the sensation, and depending on where on the body you're getting that tattoo, that sensation is more or less intense. It does hurt, and it never stops hurting. I kind of get used to it. This is actually kind of a nice place to get a tattoo because there's lots of flesh, but it does get onto the sternum, which is a terrible place to get a tattoo. It's very painful. This line here, as she was doing this line, I honestly thought that my thyroid was getting tattooed. So there's a physical experience of being tattooed that I think is just on its own as transformative as fasting, right? Go off and fast in the desert for 40 days or sit for a tattoo for 4 hours. And I feel like you're getting the same, right? Drum beat, the kinds of things that entrance the mind are repetition, intense physical sensation. And that's, the tattoo gun is precisely that. It's very, very fast, repeated. So the brain becomes entrained to the rhythm of the gun. One of the things we talked about yesterday is that today many tattoo artists use newer guns that are single. They look like a pen, quite big. They're lighter and maybe easier to be more facile with. Whereas a traditional tattoo gun looks like something you made out of bits and pieces found in the hardware store, and then so they're noisy, and they look awesome, and they're very well calibrated machines, but they look like just this big chunk of like metal pieces stuck together with a needle jabbing in and out of you. And I like that. I think that is essential. The noise of the machine. That's right. These new guns don't make a noise. The motor is smaller, more efficient, whatever. But there's no noise to it. And I don't think I could get a tattoo without the noise. Partly because when you're lying there, I mean, some of the places that you get tattoos are so painful that it really is a spiritual experience just to kind of maintain awareness and lucidity through the experience. And anyone who tells you otherwise is maybe exaggerating. So there's that sensation. And then there's the knowledge that something permanent is being etched on something that is essentially impermanent. Let me rephrase that. The body, one of the questions that I'm always asked is less, well, I'm always used to be asked this question when I was young. You get a tattoo, they say, well, aren't you worried about what it will look like when you're old? And that never bothered me. First off, because I think old tattoos on older people look flippin' awesome. I think it says you've had a life, and here's a mark of that life. So I was kind of looking forward to when some of my early tattoos started to really show their age. And I have some shitty tattoos that I got when I was young, and it was very different back then. I mean, it was 40 fucking years ago that I got my, excuse the language, it was a long time ago. It was 1987. 87, 97, 17. Yeah, it was nearly 40 years ago that I got my first tattoo. And times were different then. It wasn't, you couldn't, there weren't tattoo shops in the hip parts of town, right? And they weren't really artistic. They were just pieces of shit, like flash art from the wall. The first tattoo I ever got was a Joker on the back of my shoulder. I got it when I was a junior in college and was living in London. Was in college here in the States, but I went to London for the year. And I went to a tattoo shop in Elephant and Castle. Okay, so one of the wonderful things about tattoos is that they embody these stories. Yeah, the image is important, but the time and place of getting a tattoo is more indelible than the actual image. And for me, Michelle, my tattoo artist, is part of that, because we can talk. We have a certain sympathy. We think very similar about things, and that connection is kind of it transcends normal day-to-day activity. It transcends it, but it also it precedes it. You know, it kind of gets down to the basic level of sensation. What comes to mind, and this is a bit of a tangent, excuse me, but not a tattoo, but I had some surgery where there was quite a large incision here, which is very painful. Surprisingly, it's more painful than getting your head cut open. And when I was in the hospital recovering, their main concern was whether I would be able to leave the hospital and manage the pain. And I thought, well, of course, this is fine. But I said that while I had a self-administered morphine trip and a stunt in my spine. What's it called? An epidural. Right? So I couldn't feel anything. And also I was getting shot up with steroids every 4 hours. So I felt really pretty good. When they took that epidural out, the wave of sensation was as if someone had taken multiple tattoo guns and just run up my spine at the same time. What's the Kafka story? The prisoner? Is that where the prisoner is? Where you are executed by a large tattoo gun that tattoos your crime in your body? That was an experience unlike anything I'd ever had before, and it at the time I thought, I want this to stop. Like, I would have done anything to make that stop. I would have cut my head off. I would have become addicted to morphine. I would have run through a window. I would have done anything. And eventually it subsided. But isn't that Buddhism 101? We avoid the things that we think are unpleasant. When what I really needed to do was just say, this is what it is. Now, when you get a tattoo, there's some control over it. You can split it up over time. You can always stop doing it. But the intensity of the experience is unique. I don't think there's anything else quite like it. So look, some spiritual traditions prohibit tattoos. I'm not sure why. I haven't done the research. And I think others glorify the tattoo as a mark of some kind of accomplishment or some kind of meaning. I don't think of my tattoos as being meaningful in and of themselves, except as they mark a point in time, in the procession of time that is my life. And I think that is deeply meaningful. I'm going to continue to get tattoos for as long as I can. There was a time when I was very aware that I had an artist who I adored, money to spend on tattoos, and the urge to get tattoos, right? And all three of those need to be in place. And any one of those can go away at any point. And I've been incredibly fortunate that for a really extended period of time, if I want a tattoo, the artist I want to work with is there, and I have the resources to do it. So I guess to wrap this up, like a tattoo, like the experience of getting a tattoo, like really everything, is dependent on those conditions being present. And so while I'm lying there getting inked up, I'm really aware that is where I am. You know, the same way that if I'm drumming or when I used to run, I would run long distances, like marathon distances. Get to a point where all you're doing is one step. You know, the precision of my awareness while I'm getting a tattoo, particularly a long, big tattoo. This was relatively small compared to some of the pieces. It took a couple hours total. The mindset, it's a gift in every sense to have the tattoo, to have the experience of the tattoo. And yeah, it looks awesome. I mean, tattoos are awesome. Let's never forget that a tattoo is just an awesome thing. So, let me know if you have any tattoos, and what did you think? Why did you get it? How did you decide what to get? Do you have any tattoos you regret? I thought I regretted some tattoos. I have this one on my wrist here that I got at a crazy ass biker bar when I first, a really terrible place when I first moved to Pittsburgh. And when I first started getting more tattoos, I thought, well, I should cover it up with stuff like this, right? And this was some of the first things I got with Michelle. And she was very clear, no. We'll go around it. And it will just become part of it, even if it's not really, which, you know, it doesn't really blend in. But there it is. And the thing is, recognize that when I was 19 when I got this, 18, 19. I was 20-something when I got my second tattoo. This, I would have been 22 or 23 when I got that tattoo. And recognize that I went and did that, right? Because, like I said, it wasn't just walking down the street and going to a nice, clean, safe, hip, family-friendly place, right? So honor the shitty tattoos. I mean, if you got something really gross, get it removed or covered up. But if it's just kind of a shitty tattoo, actually respect that you went out. I look at that and think, that guy, that young kid going out and getting that tattoo was looking for something, an experience of some kind. So, there we go. As always, keep your wits about you.